What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're getting into 5 things that you might be doing to mess up your real estate videos if you're just getting started, and easy ways to get them fixed. So thanks for joining, let's get into it. So in this industry, a lot of people are switching from photography and then adding on videography. Obviously, there's a lot of overlaps with real estate photography, but to do videography, you have to learn a whole new skill set, like operating a gimbal, color grading, editing software, music, timing, all sorts of stuff, sound design. So the number one thing I see people struggle with when they're new to this is their gimbal is always like just a little bit off. And depending on which way you're shooting, what type of camera movements you're doing, body movements, it looks just a little bit more off, a little bit more off. And then some rooms are just like really bad. So the easy fix to this is just spend a little bit more time balancing your gimbal, especially that horizontal axis. Use your on-camera level to make sure it's like perfect, as close as possible. I know with zoom lenses, sometimes it gets a little bit different while you're shooting. But for me, I usually balance it at 16 millimeters since I've got a 16-35, because that's where it's normally gonna be at for most of my shots with that lens. But if you've already shot a house and you realize this, that your horizontals are just a little bit off, all you have to do is go into your effects panel and change your clip rotation just a little bit, like either plus 0.5 or negative 0.5, depending on which way it's a little bit skewed. And if you're doing this, make sure that you also are gonna have to zoom in just a little bit so that you don't end up with like little black spots on your frame, because that looks pretty unprofessional. So that's the number one thing that I see people doing, that if it's off, it just totally makes their whole video look unprofessional, and like maybe something's wrong with the house or something. So I would say if you're having issues with that, definitely put some time into getting that fixed before your shoot. All right, next. Number 2 is white balance. Every room changes a little bit. Some rooms have more sunlight coming in the windows. Some rooms are more orange from the interior lights or the time of day you're shooting. And really one of the biggest goals that I have when I'm doing cinematography is to do everything in a way that the viewer doesn't really notice it. They can just like peacefully watch it and see the details they want, see the story you're trying to convey, and they're not noticing weird things like the camera settings changing mid-frame or like the color shifting from shot to shot. So keeping it balanced is really important. For my videos, I usually just use the Kelvin scale to set my color temperatures for every single shot. And I just usually use my on-camera monitor, because you're on a gimbal and keeping things lightweight and small is great. So I usually just eyeball it, and my starting point for real estate stuff is if it's super orange, or if you're shooting at night or something, shooting around 3200 Kelvin is a good starting point. Sometimes it's a little bit warmer or cooler than that, depending on the light bulbs. And then mixed lighting is usually around 45 to 4800 Kelvin. And then if it's like pure bright daylight, like this shot I'm shooting right now, it's gonna be at 55 or 5600 Kelvin. If you've got like a sunset or something, I usually go ahead and start at like 7000 to make it look nice and warm. Trust me, learning color balance is gonna go a long way, a long way. Matcha. I guess what I should call this next one is not keeping the shots focused enough. Let me explain. So let's say you're going around a corner to view a primary bedroom suite, and you start to curve around the corner, it looks great and everything, but then your camera, instead of like centering perfectly on the bed, it is gonna be still looking at the window or something. Does that make sense? So like The shots have no landing point. Let's go with that. It's hard to explain, but I see a lot of people doing this, and I know for me, that was one of the big things that once I figured it out, my shots instantly looked like 10 times better. You gotta have your end frame ready to go in your mind to where you land on that, and you keep the viewer focused on what you wanna do. So you gotta put a little more thought into it, but your shots are gonna come out 10 times better than if you just come around the corner and that's your whole goal of the shot, is like the camera movement looking cool or something. Probably one of the biggest beginner mistakes is not walking smoothly when you're using a gimbal. So if you're watching footage and you see it like kind of galloping up and down and up and down, you can see people's footsteps, and that really takes you out of the viewer experience of watching the video. For real estate, it's really the easiest to watch if everything's just kind of clinically smooth and perfect. It's easier to see all the information and almost feel like you've been there. So I've got two ways to fix that. So number one is bend your knees, walk from heel to toe really smoothly, pretend like you're a ninja or something, and it's gonna go a long way. If you casually just hold your gimbal and walk like normal, it's gonna look bad. So you've gotta hold this, bend your knees a little bit, and try to keep this pretty even though you're walking. It takes a little bit of practice to get good with it. It's kind of an awkward thing for your body to do, carry around like a 5-10 pound weight like this for like minutes at a time. It's weird. So the more practice you get in with this, the more natural it's gonna feel, and it's gonna get easier and easier over time. All right, the second way to fix this is to do shorter movements with your shots. A lot of times whenever people are just starting out, they try to do crazy gimbal movements where you're starting out at an entryway and you're going all the way through the whole house in one shot perfectly. And it's really just not that realistic unless you're just like really good at this stuff. I rarely go any bit further than like 10 or 15 feet, maybe max. So that just gives you a lot more control, and your hands are not gonna get all wobbly and tired and stuff, which will give you more smooth and steady results anyways, because you're able to focus really well for 10, 15 feet compared to if you're doing a really long, super complicated, precise shot. And a lot of people try to do that when they're just starting out for some reason. I guess it's like a trend or something. But my recommendation, more than anything, if you're new, is just get out and practice as much as you possibly can. And once you've practiced enough, you're gonna get better and smoother and more concise with your movements. So a lot of people that send me their videos to check out, they just set their exposure way too dark on the inside, and I think that's because they're just afraid of blowing things out. They really want to try to get the window view to show up in the edit, and for most cameras, especially if you're starting out, the camera you're using, you're probably not going to have enough dynamic range to show interior and exterior perfectly. It's almost impossible even if you have like a Red camera or a Blackmagic cinema camera or even Sony's and stuff. Like, you can kind of do it sometimes if there's good natural light, but it's really hard. Just like being thoughtful about your composition, you've got to be thoughtful about your exposure and what do you want it to be effortless for the viewer to see. And if you're showing an interior space, you got to choose that, okay? For example, if you're showing a kitchen, it might have great windows, but if you can't see the countertop, the stove, the oven, all that stuff, what's the point of the shot? You're just trying to show like one little window, and that's not as important in the end. So I guess this one is like almost too simple to mention, but you want to expose for what you're intending the viewer to see easily. So expose for intent is what we can say. So if you get a blown out window, that's not that big of a deal as long as you can see the important stuff that you're trying to show. And while we're talking about exposure, I would definitely recommend shoot in log if your camera has it, or if it has some type of HLG format or HDR built in somehow. Whatever has the most dynamic range in your shots, go with that, because I know for me, whenever I switched to a camera that had log, it made a huge difference. All right, that's about it for this one. I know there's lots and lots of other things we could have covered in this video, but it would be way too long. So if you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments and I will be glad to help you guys out as much as I can. If you see any comments that you can help other people with, try to do that. Let's try to help each other. That'd be cool. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.